The story you're about to hear is one of love, loss, redemption, and the power of second chances. It begins on a seemingly perfect summer day in the Ferreira family's beautiful garden, where life appears idyllic on the surface. But beneath the tranquility lies a tale of heartbreak and betrayal, where a little girl's innocent joy leads to a near tragedy, and a father's desperate love for his daughter reveals the cracks in a fragile marriage. As the story unfolds, we see a man who must confront the mistakes of his past, rediscover his true love, and reclaim the life he was meant to live. Join us as we journey through the highs and lows of Enrique Ferreira's life, a story that moves from happiness to sorrow, and finally to a place of healing and hope. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. On a sweltering summer day, the Ferreira family gathered in their lush, sun-drenched yard, the air thick with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. Enrique, the patriarch of the family, sought refuge from the relentless sun under the ornate gazebo, his presence commanding yet solitary. Draped in a luxurious robe, his eyes concealed beneath a dark blindfold, he quietly sipped his coffee, savoring each sip with a pained calmness. His wife, Cecilia, a vision of perfection with her flawless figure and meticulously maintained appearance, lounged nearby, basking in the golden rays with a cocktail in hand. Her long, dark lashes fluttered like the first light of dawn as she glanced at her stepdaughter Bea, a sprightly little girl darting around the pool, her laughter echoing like chimes in the breeze. Bea, with her curly brown hair and cherubic cheeks, radiated the innocence and joy of childhood, chasing a butterfly with unbridled excitement, her small feet pattering against the hot tiles. "Bea, for heaven's sake, stop that running. Can you please sit still for just 5 minutes? You're giving me a headache, you troublesome little thing." Cecilia's sharp voice cut through the peaceful air, her irritation palpable. But Bea, already accustomed to her stepmother's lack of warmth, hardly reacted, her wide eyes still fixed on the delicate butterfly dancing just out of reach. Suddenly, as if the world itself held its breath, a magnificent, ethereal bubble with iridescent wings floated up from the pool, capturing Bea's full attention. With careful hands, she reached for her phone, eager to capture this moment of fleeting beauty. But in her innocent enthusiasm, she misjudged her steps, and in a split second, she was tumbling headfirst into the shimmering water, her tiny body sinking into the cool depths. Panic seized her as she flailed helplessly, her desperate cries for help filling the air. "Dad, Dad, please help me," she screamed, her voice trembling with terror. Enrique, despite his near blindness, leapt to his feet, his heart pounding with fear. He stumbled toward the pool, his hands outstretched, groping for direction as the darkness of his vision closed in around him. "Cecilia," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Cecilia, help her. I can't see. Where is she? Please, help Bea." But Cecilia, unmoved, remained reclined on her sunbed, her face twisted with annoyance. "I told you to stay still, Bea. Maybe this will teach you a lesson," she snapped, her voice cold and detached. "Stop that screaming. Someone, get her out of the water already." It was Pedro, the gardener, who reacted with the urgency the situation demanded. Abandoning his work, he sprinted to the pool, diving in without hesitation. Within moments, he had Bea safely in his arms, lifting her out of the water as she coughed and spluttered, her little body trembling with fear. She dashed into her father's waiting arms, clinging to him as sobs racked her small frame. "Dad, I was so scared," she whimpered. "I just wanted to take a picture of the butterfly. My phone. It's in the water now. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." Enrique hugged her tightly, his voice soothing and full of love. "It's all right, my sweet girl. A phone can be replaced, you cannot. You're safe now, and that's all that matters. But please, my love, be more careful next time. Stay away from the edge. The tiles are slippery, and you gave your old dad quite a scare." Cecilia, however, was far from compassionate. Her fury boiled over, her face a mask of disdain. "You're too soft on her, Enrique. She disobeyed you, nearly drowned, and destroyed an expensive phone, yet all you do is coddle her." Enrique's patience finally snapped, his voice rising with an anger he rarely displayed. "How dare you speak to her that way? She's just a child who lost her mother and is doing her best. Instead of helping her, you sat there, indifferent to her cries for help. If it weren't for Pedro, who knows what could have happened? Bea is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world. If you cannot accept that, then maybe you should reconsider your place in our lives. And don't think that having your own child would make them any less prone to mischief. Children run, they play, they make mistakes. It's our job to guide them, not punish them for every misstep. I will find a nanny, but not because you refuse to lift a finger. I will find one because Bea deserves care and attention, something you seem unwilling to provide." Cecilia's eyes widened as the weight of Enrique's words settled over her. Realizing she had overstepped, she softened her tone, attempting to mend the rift she had deepened. "Enrique, darling, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just exhausted. I love you and I want to be there for you, but I'm overwhelmed. Between my workouts, spa appointments, and keeping up appearances, I hardly have time for myself, let alone to care for Bea. A nanny would really help, wouldn't it? It would make everything so much easier. Please just think about it. Now, I really must go. I have a manicure and massage scheduled. I love you, Enrique. Don't stay mad at me." And with that, she departed, leaving Enrique to cradle his daughter, his heart heavy with the realization that, despite all the beauty and luxury that surrounded them, the true riches of life lay in the love and care they showed to one another. Bea watched with a quiet relief as her stepmother, Cecilia, left the yard. Her small hands clung to her father, seeking comfort and protection as she nestled beside him. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice tinged with sadness and confusion. "I didn't mean to upset you. But why is Cecilia so mean? She doesn't love me, Dad, and I wish you could see that. I miss my real mom so much." Enrique's heart ached at his daughter's words, and he pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace. "I miss her too, my angel," he murmured, his voice heavy with the weight of loss. "Your mother was the best, truly. But you know she's watching over us from heaven now. Cecilia, she's not all bad. You two just haven't had the chance to understand each other yet. I promise, things will get better. And as for the nanny, I want you to be happy. So you'll get to choose her yourself. In fact, another candidate should be arriving soon." Bea smiled faintly, planting a soft kiss on her father's cheek before scampering off to her toys, the innocence of her youth pulling her back into play. Meanwhile, Enrique leaned back in his chair, his eyes closing as memories of his first wife, Vanessa, flooded his mind. Vanessa, the love of his life, had been the embodiment of grace and kindness. She came from a respectable family and had devoted herself to making their home a warm and loving place. She had adored Enrique, and he had been certain they would grow old together, living out their days in happiness. But fate had other plans. 2 years ago, Vanessa had succumbed to a cruel and relentless genetic disease that began shortly after she gave birth to Bea. It started innocuously enough her vision dimmed, followed by troubling lapses in memory. But then, the disease tightened its grip, stealing the strength from her limbs until she could no longer move. The vibrant woman Enrique had married was reduced to a frail, bedridden shadow of her former self, her life slipping away with each passing day. It was a harrowing ordeal, one that left Enrique feeling utterly helpless, his heart breaking as he watched the love of his life wither away. No amount of money or medical intervention could save her, and he found himself praying in despair, his cries for mercy unanswered. The day Vanessa passed was the darkest of Enrique's life, and it left a deep wound that had yet to heal. Bea had been devastated, retreating into a shell of grief that seemed impenetrable. For a long time, she cried herself to sleep, mourning the mother who had been taken from her far too soon. Enrique, too, was lost in his sorrow, convinced he could never open his heart to another woman. But life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. During a business dinner one evening, Enrique's path crossed with Cecilia's. She had been at the same restaurant, sitting with a friend, her laughter carrying across the room as she sipped martinis. There was something magnetic about her, an undeniable allure that drew Enrique in. The business dinner gradually turned into an evening of light-hearted fun, and as they danced to the slow, sensual rhythms of the music, Enrique felt the first stirrings of emotion he hadn't felt in years. Cecilia's beauty and charm were intoxicating, and before long, a whirlwind romance blossomed between them, leading to a swift marriage. Cecilia quickly made herself at home, assuming the role of the household's matriarch with ease. She directed the staff with the confidence of someone born to lead, but her relationship with Bea was strained from the start. The tension between stepmother and stepdaughter was palpable, a constant undercurrent of conflict that neither could fully ignore. Enrique had initially dismissed it as jealousy on Bea's part, believing it would fade with time. But 2 years had passed, and the rift between them had only deepened. They fought often, their arguments growing more heated as time went on. And then, just 2 weeks ago, a terrifying event unfolded that changed everything. It had been a day like any other, except that Enrique's driver, Timoteo, had requested time off for personal reasons, leaving Enrique to drive himself to work. He had stayed late at the office that night, and as he made his way to his car in the dimly lit parking lot, 3 men ambushed him from behind. Enrique had fought back with all his might, but one of the assailants managed to spray pepper spray directly into his eyes. The searing pain was blinding, and Enrique collapsed, defenseless. Fortunately, a passing police car scared off the attackers, but the damage was done. Enrique's vision was severely compromised, leaving him nearly blind. The doctors had prescribed an intensive treatment regimen, warning that surgery might be his only hope of restoring his sight if the medications failed. This uncertain prognosis left Enrique anxious and on edge, his once steady life thrown into disarray. For a while, Enrique was incapacitated, forced to remain at home while he recovered. This sudden change in his life was difficult to bear, but what troubled him most was the mystery of who had attacked him and why. He hadn't been involved in any serious conflicts recently, leaving him bewildered and unsettled. Despite his physical limitations, he continued to manage his company from home, connecting with partners and holding virtual meetings. To his surprise, Cecilia adapted quickly to the situation, diving headfirst into the business world. She seemed to thrive under the pressure, taking on new responsibilities with a determination that both impressed and worried Enrique. But even as Cecilia took charge in the business realm, the unresolved tensions at home weighed heavily on Enrique's mind. The delicate balance of their lives seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was slipping through his fingers, something that no amount of success or wealth could replace. Enrique's thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a soft, melodic voice that seemed to cut through the tension in the air. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Enrique Ferreira? My name is Marlene. I'm here for the nanny position, and I believe my interview is scheduled for 12. The businessman, though unable to see the young woman before him, instinctively felt a sense of warmth and kindness emanating from her. A smile touched his lips as he reached out, feeling the delicate hand that gently grasped his. Something about her presence felt reassuring. He began his inquiry with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Marlene, may I ask, how old are you? How much experience do you have working with children? Can you provide recommendations from your previous employment? And what is your educational background? You see, my daughter is everything to me, and I need to ensure she is in the care of someone truly exceptional." Marlene hesitated, a slight sigh escaping her lips. "Mr. Ferreira, I have to be honest, I might not be the perfect candidate you're looking for. I don't have formal recommendations or a wealth of experience, but I do have a deep love for children. I'm more than willing to work for a modest salary. I've already met your daughter, Bea, and she's an absolutely delightful girl. I promise to dedicate myself to her completely." Just as Enrique began to weigh the uncertainty of hiring someone so young and inexperienced, Bea, with her boundless energy, came rushing over. Sensing her father's hesitation, she interjected with the innocence only a child could possess, her eyes sparkling as she winked at Marlene. "Dad, please choose Marlene. I really like her. You did say I could pick my nanny, didn't you?" Enrique felt torn. On one hand, Marlene was only 23, with no references or significant experience, a gamble that could either turn out wonderfully or disastrously. Who knew what kind of person she truly was? Yet there was something undeniable about her. Her voice was gentle, and most importantly, Bea had taken an immediate liking to her. For the first time in a long while, he saw a spark of genuine excitement in his daughter's eyes. After a moment of deep contemplation, Enrique made his decision. "All right, Marlene, you're hired, but on a trial basis. I want to see how you handle things before making anything permanent. You can start immediately. There's a schedule to follow: dance and drawing classes, outdoor activities, homework. Make sure Bea eats well. And keep me informed about her health and any changes you notice. Is that clear?" Marlene's eyes filled with tears of gratitude, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much, Mr. Ferreira. I promise I will give this job everything I have." And so, from that day forward, Marlene became a part of the Ferreira household. She quickly proved to be more than just a caregiver. She became Bea's confidante, her companion, and her friend. Marlene never scolded or pressured Bea. Instead, she found creative ways to motivate her. Whenever she noticed Bea losing interest or getting lazy with her studies, Marlene would craft a playful challenge. "All right, here's the deal," she'd say with a mischievous grin. "Whoever finishes their task faster and better gets the biggest, yummiest vanilla ice cream. But the loser, well, they'll have to eat oatmeal porridge for 2 whole days. And honestly, I can't stand oatmeal. How about you?" Marlene's clever tactics and genuine affection quickly won over Bea, who adored her new nanny. The bond they formed was built on mutual respect and fun, turning what could have been just another job into something truly special for both of them. Marlene had found her place in the Ferreira family, and in doing so, she brought a renewed sense of joy and harmony to their home. Bea, determined to prove herself, would sometimes sulk when Marlene challenged her with those playful competitions, especially when it involved the dreaded oatmeal porridge. With a stubborn resolve, she'd scribble those alphabet letters furiously, trying her best to outdo Marlene and ensure she'd win the sweet reward instead of facing the bland punishment. Enrique noticed the change in his daughter. Her academics were improving, and she seemed happier, more engaged. Every evening, Bea would eagerly share her day's adventures with her father, recounting how Marlene had shown her how to craft an intricate hairstyle or taught her the art of making delicate macarons. Enrique couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and joy at seeing his daughter so animated and content. However, not everyone in the household shared his sentiments. Cecilia, ever critical, was far from pleased with the new nanny. Her discontent simmered beneath the surface, often spilling out in sharp comments. "Enrique, I don't know why you chose that peculiar young woman as Bea's nanny. She's not just bold, she coddles your daughter even more than you do. This isn't how education should be. We need to be firmer with Bea, or she'll become too complacent. She used to at least show some reaction when I spoke to her, even if it was annoyance. Now she just stays silent and follows Marlene around like a shadow." Enrique, tired of the constant complaints, responded calmly, Cecilia, it seems no nanny will ever meet your standards. If Bea is rude, it bothers you if she's quiet. That's also a problem. Perhaps it's not the nanny that's the issue, but the fact that you haven't tried to connect with Bea in a meaningful way. Cecilia pressed her lips together in frustration, choosing to hold her tongue. Inside, though, she fumed, thinking to herself, do whatever you want, Enrique. Just keep that insufferable girl away from me. I'm so exhausted by her presence. The mansion, grand and filled with echoes of the past, housed a beautiful grand piano, a relic from Enrique's former life as a musician. Every now and then, nostalgia would draw him to the instrument, and he'd play a few melodies, losing himself in the memories of his youth. One evening, as he wandered the halls, he heard the soft strains of music floating from the piano room. Surprised, he followed the sound and found Marlene seated at the keys, her fingers dancing over them with a delicate grace. Marlene, do you play the piano? Enrique asked, his voice filled with pleasant surprise. I didn't know. I used to be a musician too. Play something else, will you? I'm curious to hear more. Marlene blushed, her cheeks flushing a soft pink as she replied, I'm not a professional, Mr. Ferreira. But I had a wonderful music teacher at the orphanage who taught me. He always said I had a talent for it. I've loved music ever since. Especially this melody, it's always touched something deep within me. With a shy smile, she began to play a slow, romantic tune, the notes flowing like a gentle stream through the room. Enrique stood still, captivated by the music that stirred something deep within his soul. As the melody filled the air, memories from his youth, long buried under the weight of time, came rushing back. Tears welled up in his eyes and rolled down his cheeks as he whispered to himself in disbelief, "Oh my God, this is impossible." The music carried him back to a time when life was simpler, when love and dreams filled his days with hope. It was as if Marlene's playing had unlocked a door to his past, flooding his heart with emotions he had thought long forgotten. For a moment, all the worries, the pain, and the uncertainties of the present melted away, leaving only the bittersweet beauty of the music and the memories it evoked. As Marlene's fingers gently lifted from the piano keys, bringing the haunting melody to a close, Enrique felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over him. He turned to her, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "Marlene, where did you learn to play this particular piece? It's so familiar to me, yet I know it's not widely known. In fact, it was composed by someone I once held dear." Marlene's eyes softened as she recalled the source of the melody. "It was my neighbor, Ruth, who taught me to play it," she explained, her tone tinged with a deep sadness. "She's an incredibly talented and kind-hearted woman, but life has been unbelievably cruel to her. Her son was taken away from her, and she lost her job for reasons that are unjust and heartbreaking. She's been plunged into a deep depression, and I've been trying my best to lift her spirits. But it's a daunting task." Enrique's heart began to pound, each beat echoing in his ears as a sudden wave of anxiety washed over him. His legs felt unsteady, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. With a sense of urgency, he pressed Marlene for more information, his voice betraying his rising concern. "Tell me more about your neighbor. How old is she? What's her full name? And what about her son? How old is he? Why was he taken from her?" Marlene let out a heavy sigh, sensing the intensity of his questions. "Her name is Ruth Figueroa. She's probably around 30, though I've never asked her exact age. Her son, Adam Astor, is 9 years old. He's an incredible boy, bright, mature beyond his years, and full of potential. I don't know much about Ruth's personal life, whether she was married or who Adam's father might be, but I do know that she once mentioned a first love that ended in tragedy. It seems to have marked her deeply." Marlene paused, her voice growing more somber as she continued. "Ruth was a music teacher at a prestigious private school, and she loved her job. She earned a respectable salary and was dedicated to her work. But then, everything began to unravel. The school's principal, a man in his 50s with a family of his own, started pursuing her. When Ruth didn't reciprocate his advances, he turned her life into a living hell. Ruth stood her ground and reported his behavior to his wife and the authorities. But that's when things took a dark turn. Someone broke into her apartment while she was away, leaving behind cigarette butts and empty whiskey bottles, things Ruth would never have in her home. When she returned with Adam, social services were waiting, along with false witnesses who accused her of neglect. They took Adam away from her, claiming she was unfit to care for him, which is a blatant lie. I visited her many times, and her home was always immaculate. Ruth doesn't smoke, and she only drinks wine on rare, special occasions. Marlene's voice trembled with emotion as she described the aftermath. Ruth was devastated. She knocked on every door, pleaded with every authority, trying to get her son back and clear her name, but it was all in vain. The principal used his influence to get her fired and publicly humiliated her. Since then, Ruth has been a shell of her former self, spending her days in despair, often sitting outside the orphanage where Adam is kept, crying for him. Adam, poor boy, is suffering there too. They paint a rosy picture of orphanages on TV, but the reality is a nightmare. My heart aches for them both, but I feel powerless against the cruelty of that old man who destroyed their lives with his connections and corruption. Enrique was utterly shaken, his mind reeling as the pieces of the story fell into place. Tears welled up in his eyes, stinging as they flowed freely down his cheeks. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt. This was no coincidence. It couldn't be. With a voice that quivered with a mix of disbelief and desperation, he asked Marlene, "Please, Marlene, I need you to bring Ruth here tomorrow. I must see her, hear her voice. We know each other, but it's a long and complicated story. I beg you, do this for me." Marlene, startled by the intensity of his request, hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, I'll do it. I'll come with her tomorrow morning if she's willing. But how should I explain this to her? What should I say?" Enrique, his voice thick with emotion and barely above a whisper, replied, "Just tell her. Enrique is waiting for her." Marlene went to the kitchen to prepare lunch for Bea, leaving Enrique alone with his thoughts. As soon as the door closed behind them, he retreated to his study, the weight of the past pressing heavily on his chest. He locked the door, sank into his chair, and buried his head in his hands, allowing memories to flood his mind, pulling him back to the days of his youth, a time when life was simpler, yet far more complicated in ways he hadn't fully understood then. Enrique had been raised by his mother, a strong woman who had to navigate the world alone after his father, an adventurous explorer, disappeared on one of his expeditions, never to return. Enrique never knew his father, and as he grew older, he learned not to ask about him. His mother did her best to provide, but it was a life of struggle. Yet, amid the challenges, Enrique found solace in music. Even as a small boy, he could lose himself in melodies for hours, the sounds carrying him away from the hardships of reality. One day, when he was just 5 years old, his mother took him to visit friends. While the adults chatted, Enrique wandered off and found a piano in a quiet corner of the house. Intrigued, he climbed onto the bench and tentatively pressed a key, then another, forming a simple melody with childlike curiosity. His mother, noticing his fascination, decided to enroll him in music lessons. It was there, in those early lessons, that he met Ruth, a bright-eyed girl with big bows in her hair, clutching a music folder with all the seriousness of a young musician. From the moment they sat together at the same desk, a bond was formed, one that would grow and evolve over the years. As the years passed, Enrique and Ruth became inseparable, sharing a deep love for music and each other. They both enrolled in the music conservatory, where they experienced their first taste of success, performing in concerts that filled them with pride and joy. Their childhood friendship blossomed into a profound love, one that seemed destined to last forever. Ruth, with her dreamy nature and disdain for material concerns, was content to live simply, her heart and soul dedicated to music. She cared little for the trappings of wealth, seeing them as distractions from what truly mattered. But as they grew older, Enrique's desires began to shift. He dreamed of a life beyond the modest earnings of a musician. He wanted a home of his own, a sleek car, fine clothes, and the comfort that financial security could provide. After completing the conservatory, he made a choice that would change everything. He decided to leave music behind and try his luck in the business world. He started his own venture, throwing himself into the pursuit of wealth and success. This decision, however, became a wedge between him and Ruth, leading to frequent, bitter arguments. "Why are you doing this?" Ruth would plead, her voice filled with frustration and sorrow. "Don't abandon music, it's your gift. You were born to create, to play. Your talent is extraordinary." But Enrique, driven by a different vision of success, would respond with growing irritation. "Ruth, you're not living in the real world. Can't you see that we're struggling? How do you expect us to survive on the meager income from music? Who even cares about concerts anymore? I'm working hard to give you the things you deserve: those gold earrings, nice clothes, good food. Any other woman would be thrilled, but you just lecture me on how to live my life." Ruth's heart would break a little more each time, the man she loved slipping further away from the boy she had once known. One day, in a moment of hurt and anger, she pulled the earrings from her ears and threw them at Enrique. "Take them," she cried, her voice shaking with emotion. "They're worthless to me if you're going to use them against me. Maybe it's better if we end this. I don't even recognize you anymore. You've changed so much, become so hard, so cold, so soulless. All I've ever wanted is a simple, quiet life filled with love, loyalty, and trust. I don't need wealth or luxury. But you're obsessed with money. You disappear for days, come home with red eyes, and you've completely abandoned your music. When was the last time you even touched a piano? I won't tutor children for money, and I won't let you dictate how I should live." Enrique, his patience worn thin, waved her off dismissively. "Fine," he snapped, "then go. Live your life however you want, but you'll regret leaving me. Mark my words, I'll become a great businessman, and we'll see who was right." With that, their paths diverged. Enrique buried himself in his business endeavors, climbing the ladder of success, while Ruth continued to live for music, albeit with a heart wounded by the loss of the man she had once believed would be her partner for life. The memories of their love, their shared dreams, and the music they had once made together lingered like a haunting melody in Enrique's mind as he sat alone in his study, the weight of regret heavy upon his shoulders. Their argument had been senseless, born out of youthful stubbornness and pride, leading to a hasty, foolish end. Afterward, Enrique threw himself into his work with relentless determination. He managed to build a successful chain of mechanic shops, pouring his energy into his business day and night. In the midst of his ambition, he met Vanessa, got married, and soon their daughter Bea was born. Life became a whirlwind of responsibilities and worries, leaving no room to dwell on the past. The memories of Ruth and the music they once shared faded into the background as Enrique focused on providing for his family. But life has a way of bringing old flames back into the picture when least expected. Years later, Enrique crossed paths with Ruth once more, and the feelings he had buried deep within his heart resurfaced with a vengeance. While he cared for Cecilia, it was not the same as the pure, untainted joy he had once known with Ruth and their shared love for music. Now, as he sat in his study, hearing that long-forgotten melody, written by Ruth herself, his heart ached with a longing that he hadn't felt in years. A wild desire overtook him. He needed to find Ruth again, to speak with her, to reconnect, regardless of how it might look to the outside world. After all, a first love never truly dies, it remains in the heart forever. indelible and unforgettable. The anticipation of seeing Ruth again made the hours crawl by. Enrique could hardly wait for the next day to arrive. That morning, he meticulously shaved, dressed in his best clothes, and tried to calm the storm of emotions brewing inside him. He waited impatiently for Cecilia to leave for the salon, enduring her meaningless chatter about fashion and gossip with barely concealed agitation. When Marlene returned with Bea from school, she wasn't alone. Ruth was with her. Enrique's vision, still blurred, only allowed him to make out a vague silhouette, but the soft scent of her familiar floral perfume and the sweet, soothing tone of her voice were unmistakable. The years had passed, but some things had remained unchanged. Ruth's voice trembled with surprise and concern as she spoke. "Enrique, is it really you? When Marlene told me yesterday that you wanted to see me, I could hardly believe it. You've changed so much. You've become a strong and influential man. But why did you want to see me after all this time? And why are you wearing that black band over your eyes? Are you unwell?" Hearing her words, filled with worry and fear, Enrique couldn't hold back the tears that welled up in his eyes. They flowed freely down his cheeks as he reached out and took Ruth's hand in his own, feeling the familiar softness of her skin and the long, delicate fingers that had once made beautiful music. "My dear Ruth," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I can't tell you how happy I am to see you again, to breathe in your perfume, to hear your voice. We were so foolish back then to end things the way we did. You ask what happened to me just 2 weeks ago. I was attacked by some men. They sprayed pepper spray in my face, and now I'm nearly blind. I can only make out blurry shapes. The doctors say I need surgery, but none of that matters right now. What matters is you, Ruth. Marlene told me you have a son, Adamastor. Ruth, please, tell me the truth. Is he mine? Do we have a child together?" Ruth's breath caught in her throat, and she sighed deeply before answering in a soft, sorrowful voice. "Yes, Enrique, Adamastor is your son. I've never been with another man since you. No matter how hard I tried to forget you, I couldn't. But they took my boy away from me. Enrique, my heart is shattered. I can barely sleep. I just sit outside the orphanage, hoping to catch a glimpse of him through the window. What did I do to deserve this? I've never harmed anyone. I hate the man who destroyed my life, who bribed everyone just to make me suffer as much as possible. I'm so desperate, Enrique. I'm almost ready to agree to his terms just to get my son back. I don't see any other way out." Enrique's grip on her hand tightened, his voice rising with a fierce determination. "No, Ruth, don't even think about it. You don't have to face this alone anymore. I'll help you get our son back. Give me all the information you have. I'll find the right people. Hire the best lawyers. We'll bring that despicable man down together. And I have connections in the police department, remember Keo? You won't believe it, but he's now a police captain. I'll reach out to him. We'll make sure Adamastor comes home where he belongs. I won't let our son be lost in the system, wandering through orphanages. Trust me, Ruth, everything will be all right. I've never stopped thinking about you. And now that I've found you again, I won't let you go. We'll get through this, I promise." Ruth, her eyes brimming with tears, looked at Enrique with a mixture of hope and disbelief, her heart daring to believe that perhaps, after all these years, happiness might still be within reach. Ruth, feeling a renewed sense of hope for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, listened intently as Enrique made the call to Keo. True to his word, Keo was more than willing to help his old friend, and after discussing the situation, they devised a plan, a sting operation that could finally bring justice for Ruth and reunite her with her son. The plan required Ruth to contact the corrupt director and pretend to agree to his despicable terms, setting up a meeting where he could be caught in the act. Ruth's role was crucial. She had to elicit a confession from the director, which would then lead to his arrest. The thought of facing him again filled Ruth with dread, but the love for her son fueled her determination. With trembling hands, Ruth took a deep breath and dialed the director's number, her heart pounding in her chest. The line rang twice before his voice, dripping with arrogance, answered, finally decided to call, "Scared girl. What do you want?" Ruth's anger flared at his condescending tone, but she forced herself to remain composed, responding with as much politeness as she could muster. "Gil, I'm begging you, please, just give me back my son. I'll agree to whatever you want. Let's meet, just tell me when and where." On the other end of the line, Gil's voice oozed with mockery. "Fine, let's meet tomorrow at 6 p.m. in my office. Don't keep me waiting, my little sweet bird." Ruth nearly gagged at his revolting words, but she swallowed her revulsion and focused on the task at hand. She had to see this through. After ending the call, she took a moment to gather herself, knowing that the next day would be one of the most difficult of her life. She carefully dressed in her best clothes, as much as her current circumstances allowed, making sure the hidden recording device was securely in place. The thought of her son, Adam Astor, kept her steady as she made her way to the director's office, her legs trembling with each step. Before she left, the detective had given her a crucial instruction: if things spiraled out of control, she was to open the window as a signal. The police would be waiting outside, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. With that in mind, Ruth took a deep breath and knocked on the door of the director's office. When she entered, she found him lounging in his chair, a smug smile plastered on his face as he looked her up and down. "Good evening, my little bird," he greeted her with a sickening familiarity. "I see life has been kind to you. You're looking more beautiful than ever. It's been far too long since we last met. Come closer, let me admire you properly." Ruth's stomach churned at his audacity, fear and anger battling for control within her. The thought of what he might try terrified her, but the knowledge that the police were nearby and the image of her son's face gave her the strength to continue. Forcing a smile, she accepted a glass of champagne and nibbled on the sweets he offered, trying to buy time. "Gil, why rush? We don't have to be hasty. Let's enjoy the evening drink, relax." He didn't object, opening the bottle of champagne and pouring them both a glass. Ruth took a sip, then steeled herself to get to the heart of the matter. "Gil, before we go any further, I need to be sure of something. Will you really give me back my son? I know you're responsible for everything that happened, but how did you manage to destroy my life so thoroughly? I just don't understand. How did you tarnish my good name so completely?" Gil smirked, a twisted pride gleaming in his eyes. "You should have been more accommodating from the start, Ruth. Then none of this would have been necessary. No one walks away from me without consequences. Do you think my secretary and that gym teacher work for free? They knew how to please me, unlike you. And now they're rewarded handsomely, great salaries, generous bonuses. As for you, it was easy. A friend of mine, someone quite influential in child protective services, owed me a favor. Thanks to my sponsorship, she got her position there. And she paid me back by taking your son and placing him in an orphanage. I hired a few men and some witnesses to stage that scene in your apartment: cigarette butts, whiskey bottles, the works. Money makes the world go round, Ruth. I used to love you. But you made it so difficult. The more satisfaction you give me now, the faster you'll get your son back. Are you satisfied? Now, let's get started. You talk too much." Ruth felt a surge of bile rise in her throat at his vile words, but she kept her composure, knowing that every word he spoke was being recorded, sealing his fate. As he reached for her, she steadied herself, waiting for the right moment to signal the police. The thought of finally being free from his clutches, of holding her son in her arms again, gave her the courage to continue. She glanced at the window, ready to open it when the time was right, knowing that justice was just a heartbeat away. Ruth knew she couldn't wait a moment longer. Her heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to the window, flinging it open in desperation. She silently prayed for the police to arrive in time, her hands trembling as she turned to face the director. Gil, despite his age, moved with surprising speed, charging toward her with a menacing look in his eyes. In a panic, Ruth defended herself, shoving him away with all her strength. The impact sent Gil staggering backward, knocking everything off the table in his path. Papers flew, and objects clattered to the floor as chaos erupted in the room. Gil's voice was laced with fury as he yelled, "There's no one here, Ruth, not even the janitor. Why are you fighting back now? Have you lost your mind?" But before he could move any closer, the door burst open with a deafening crack, and the police stormed into the room. The officers swiftly overpowered the director, pinning him to the ground and cuffing his hands behind his back. "Shame on you," one of the officers spat, his voice filled with disgust. "At your age, engaging in such indecent behavior, married with grandchildren, no less. How do you think they'll feel when they find out what you've done?" Gil thrashed against the restraints, his face contorted with rage. "You'll all pay for this," he screamed. "I have contacts in the police. You don't know who you're dealing with." The officer restraining him remained unfazed, tightening the cuffs. "We'll see about that. First, you're going to tell us how you managed to take this woman's child and cover it up so thoroughly." As the scene unfolded, Ruth finally allowed herself to relax, the tension that had been coiled in her chest slowly unwinding. She took a deep breath, and the floodgates of her emotions opened, tears streaming down her face as the weight of the ordeal crashed over her. "Please," she sobbed, turning to the officer, "return my son, AITA, to me now." "He confessed, didn't he? Did I do everything right?" She handed the officer the recording device, her hands shaking from the adrenaline and relief. The officer took it from her gently, nodding in reassurance. "You did everything perfectly. We've got all the evidence we need to put this man where he belongs, behind bars. Don't worry, Ruth, you'll be reunited with your son very soon." The case quickly became a scandal that gripped the town, making headlines and shocking the community. The old man, once a respected figure, was now a disgraced criminal. His conviction was swift, and the townspeople were horrified to learn that he had worked at the school for so many years, hiding his vile nature behind a facade of respectability. Ruth's good name was cleared, and she was reinstated at her job. But most importantly, she was finally reunited with her beloved son, AITA. When they were brought back together, Ruth's tears flowed freely as she clutched Adam in her arms, her lips pressing kisses to his forehead. The little boy held on to his mother with all his might, unwilling to let go. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered joy, the kind that Ruth had feared she might never experience again. Meanwhile, Enrique was consumed with a different kind of anticipation. He was eager to meet his son, his thoughts entirely focused on Ruth and the child they had brought into the world. In his mind, Cecilia, barely registered her presence, had become more of an afterthought in his life. But Cecilia, ever observant and increasingly suspicious, had been watching from a distance, her jealousy and anger simmering just beneath the surface. Unable to hold back any longer, she decided to confront him. She cornered Enrique, her voice seething with fury. "What is going on, Enrique? You're constantly talking about Ruth and her son. What's happening? I demand an explanation." Enrique, though unable to see the storm of emotions playing out on his wife's face, could feel the intensity of her anger in every word she spoke. In that moment, he realized with startling clarity that he no longer wanted to live this life with her. The passion he once felt for Cecilia had long since faded, replaced by a growing sense of indifference. He knew in his heart that she would never get along with his daughter, Bea, and he was tired of the endless power struggles and her increasing need to control everything around her. Taking a deep breath, Enrique spoke with a calm resolve he hadn't felt in years. "Cecilia, I can't continue like this. We've grown apart, and I've realized that this life we're living, it's not what I want anymore. My heart is with Ruth and our son. I think it's time we both face the truth this marriage isn't working, and it's better for us to go our separate ways." Cecilia stared at him, stunned into silence by his words, as the reality of what was happening began to sink in. Enrique's decision had been made, and there was no turning back. "We need to have a serious talk," Enrique began, his voice steady but laced with the gravity of the situation. "Ruth was my first love. We met in music school and fell deeply for each other, but we broke up foolishly. It wasn't until later that I discovered she was pregnant. She had a son, his name is AITA. That makes me the father of 2 children now, Bea and Adam." Cecilia's face twisted with rage as she exploded. "Are you telling me another child is going to live here too? I don't even want my own kids yet, and now you're trying to force someone else's child on me." Enrique met her anger with a bitter smile. "You're not listening, Cecilia. Our romance burned brightly at first, but it faded just as quickly. Now, 2 years later, we're practically strangers sharing a house. You've never gotten along with Bea, and I don't believe you ever will. Seeing Ruth again made me realize that I still love her. Tomorrow, I'm speaking with the doctor about eye surgery, but we need to consider going our separate ways. I'll leave you the apartment and the car, but after that, you'll have to find a job and start living like everyone else." Cecilia shot up from her seat, her voice rising in fury. "I'm your wife. Half of everything is mine. I've put up with your unbearable daughter for 2 years. At least have the decency to thank me for that. But I won't live with you anymore. I don't need this burden. I'm only 25, I have my whole life ahead of me. I'm not staying to take care of someone else's kids and a blind husband." Enrique's expression hardened, the weight of her words stinging. "So now that I'm incapacitated, I'm no longer good enough for you. Well, goodbye then, Cecilia. I won't hold you back." Realizing she had gone too far, Cecilia quickly tried to soften her approach. "Let's stop here. We're both upset, and we've said things we don't mean. Let's wait until you're better before having this unpleasant conversation. Don't rush into the surgery. If complications arise, I'll be here to take care of you." But her words rang hollow, insincere, and Enrique could hear the falseness in her tone. He simply turned away, his voice cold as he said, "I've said all I need to say. Listen to the meeting recording from my assistant if you need more details." Cecilia stormed out of his office, her mind racing with anger and panic. "How will I live? I'll have to work now," she thought bitterly. "I'm not cut out for this. Just wait, Enrique. You'll remember me for a long time." Feeling drained from the confrontation, Enrique decided to seek solace with Professor Ruth. She had offered to accompany him and provide support as a friend, and he found comfort in the thought of being with someone who genuinely cared for him. Later that evening, Marlene and Bea returned home from their activities, tired but in good spirits. However, the moment they walked through the door, their exhaustion turned to shock. The house was in complete disarray. Furniture was overturned, drawers had been ransacked, and several expensive items were missing. Marlene's heart raced as she took in the scene, her mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. The safe was open, the television was gone, and important documents were nowhere to be found. Panic set in as Marlene quickly grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the police. "We have an emergency. I think we've been robbed. Everything is upside down. The safe is open, the television is gone, and important documents are missing," she reported, her voice filled with urgency. She hung up and immediately called Enrique, trying to keep her voice steady. "Enrique, we've been robbed. The house is a mess, and valuable things are missing. I've already called the police. Please come home quickly." Fearful of what else might be missing or damaged, Marlene called the police again, pleading, "Please come quickly. We need help." The house, once a place of comfort, now felt like a violated space, and Marlene couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random burglary. She feared what they might uncover as they waited for the authorities to arrive. Enrique's heart pounded as he instructed Marlene over the phone, "Stay with Bea in her room, and don't open the door until I get there. Promise me." Marlene, his voice was firm, despite the fear gnawing at him. As he hung up, he quickly turned on the security camera feed, his blood running cold at what he saw. On the screen, he could see Cecilia and the driver, Timoteo, ransacking the house with ruthless efficiency. They were grabbing everything valuable, from jewelry to electronics, completely unaware that their every move was being recorded. Cecilia's voice echoed through the room, filled with spite. "See, dear? You'll remember me for this," she taunted, her face twisted with malice. Timoteo, just as enraged, snapped back. "We should have finished him off when we had the chance. Now we're going to live like kings. But what the hell is the police doing here? They've never patrolled this area before." Cecilia's eyes widened in panic, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Hurry up. We don't have much time. Bea and Marlene could be back any minute. We need to sell everything fast and buy tickets to get out of here." Enrique watched in horror as the reality of their betrayal sank in. These weren't just thieves, they were people he had trusted. The police, already alerted by Marlene, arrived swiftly, taking fingerprints and securing the scene before setting off to apprehend the fleeing pair. When Enrique finally reached home, Bea ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Her voice was a mix of relief and accusation. "I told you a long time ago, Dad, that Cecilia didn't love us. She's bad, and you didn't believe me. You'll throw her out now, won't you?" Enrique knelt down, his heart heavy yet filled with gratitude for his daughter's intuition. He kissed her forehead tenderly. "You're growing up so fast, my princess. And you're right, Cecilia won't be living with us anymore. But I want to introduce you to a wonderful woman, someone I think you'll really like. Do you remember when Ruth came to visit us? She has a son, AITA. He's your brother, and it's a long story. But I promise you'll understand everything when you're older. I really hope you two get along well. As for Cecilia and Timoteo, they'll get what they deserve. They'll go to prison for what they've done." Bea looked up at her father with concern, her voice trembling slightly. "Dad, what did the doctor say? Will your eyes get better?" Enrique smiled reassuringly, though the uncertainty weighed on him. "I'm having surgery on Monday, sweetheart. You and Marlene will stay together, and AITA will be with you too. Ruth is coming with me to the hospital. I need you to listen to Marlene and be a good girl, okay?" Meanwhile, the police had no trouble tracking down Cecilia and Timoteo. They were found hiding in Timoteo's apartment, quickly apprehended, and taken to the station. Both now faced serious charges for their attempt to harm Enrique and their role in the robbery. Cecilia, once full of bravado, was reduced to a panicked mess. The grim reality of prison life, damp gray walls, a filthy mattress, and disgusting porridge filled her with indescribable terror. The magnitude of her mistakes crashed down on her, and she spent her days and nights in tears, cursing herself. Fool, idiot. Why didn't I just live in peace? What have I done? How could I let this happen? I need to see Enrique. I have to beg for his forgiveness. He's kind, he'll forgive me. But Enrique had already made up his mind. He filed for divorce, leaving the messy details in the hands of his lawyer, and focused on what truly mattered: his surgery and the new life he hoped to build. Ruth stayed by his side through it all, offering the comfort and support he so desperately needed. Back at home, Marlene took care of the children, ensuring they felt safe and loved. At first, AITA was shy and unsure, but Bea's lively and outgoing nature soon put him at ease. The two became fast friends, their bond growing stronger each day. Adam, who had initially felt out of place, gradually began to feel at home, and after school, he would visit Enrique in the hospital, eager to spend time with his father. The day had finally arrived for Enrique to have his bandages removed, and the anticipation was palpable. As the doctor carefully unwound the bandages, the light hit Enrique's eyes, causing him to instinctively squeeze them shut, tears streaming down his face. Slowly, cautiously, he began to open his eyes, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. And then he saw the world as it was before the tragedy, vivid and clear. The doctor, satisfied with the results, gave Enrique a thorough examination and finally smiled. "Everything looks perfect. You're ready to go home." Stepping out of the office with a wide smile, Enrique's gaze immediately fell on Ruth, who was waiting anxiously in the hallway. His heart swelled with joy as he exclaimed, "Ruth, my dear, I knew you hadn't changed all these years. You're even more beautiful now. The same lips, that long hair, those eyelashes, and that familiar strand tucked behind your ear. Ruth, you are so beautiful. Finally, I can see you again. I'll never take this for granted. I'll be grateful to Marlene forever for playing that melody on the piano. It stirred something deep in my soul, something I thought I'd lost. Ruth, I'm so happy you're back in my life. I'm ready to leave behind this business that I've regretted for so long. I've made enough for us to live comfortably for years. Let's live the life you always wanted, full of love, peace, and our beloved music. Do you remember?" Tears of joy welled up in Ruth's eyes as she embraced Enrique tightly. "These are the words I've been waiting to hear all these years. I was heartbroken when you chose money and business over our love and music. But of course I remember. I still love you, Enrique. Do you remember our first kiss? You played the Moonlight Sonata for me. And then we spent the night searching for the Big Dipper in the night sky, kissing under the stars. You wrapped me in your coat and held me close, protecting me from the rain. In that moment, I was the happiest person in the world. Let's go home, Enrique. Everyone is waiting for us." When they arrived home, Bea spotted her father walking confidently from the car, and without hesitation, she ran towards him, her face alight with joy. "Hooray, Dad, you've recovered. I'm so happy. We made a cake for you, and I'm sure you'll love it. Adamastor and I helped Marlene with it." Adamastor stood a little way off, still shy and unsure, hesitant to approach. Sensing the boy's discomfort, Enrique knelt down to Bea's level and whispered, "Go ahead, sweetheart, run on home. I'll be right there." With Bea racing ahead, Enrique turned his attention to Adamastor, his heart full of emotion. He approached the boy with a gentle smile. "Hello, son. It's so good to finally see you properly. We do look alike, don't we? Your mother has told you that I'm your father, hasn't she? I'm so sorry that I missed out on the first 9 years of your life. But now that we've found each other, I want to be a real father to you, to be close to you. I'd like that very much. Please know that I love you, Adam. I'll never hurt you, and I'll always support you in whatever you do." Enrique extended his hand to Adam, who hesitated for a moment before reaching out and taking it. Enrique squeezed the boy's hand firmly but gently, his voice soft with emotion. "I'm so happy you're here with us now, and look at how your mom is smiling. She's waited so long for this moment." Then, in a gesture that solidified the bond between them, Enrique pulled Adam into a warm, tight embrace. He held the boy close, feeling the connection they had been denied for so long. "Let's all live together as one big family," Enrique murmured, his voice filled with determination and love. "It seems you've already become friends with Bea, and she's your sister now. Stay close to each other, support each other through life. We're stronger together." As they walked towards the house, hand in hand, Enrique felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. This was the family he had always longed for, and now, after so much turmoil and pain, they were finally together. The past was behind them, and the future was bright, filled with the promise of love, music, and happiness. With Ruth by his side and his children growing up together, Enrique knew that they could face whatever challenges life had in store for them. And with that thought, he smiled, ready to savor the simple joys of life like sharing a meal with the people he loved most. From that day forward, The life of Enrique Ferreira, once a wealthy and ambitious businessman, underwent a profound transformation. He became a completely different person, shedding the materialistic pursuits that had once consumed him. He sold his successful business empire, the very thing that had defined his identity for so many years, and instead devoted himself entirely to his family and his long-lost passion for music. Each morning, with a sense of renewed purpose and joy, Enrique would sit at the piano and play his favorite melodies, many of which had been buried in the recesses of his memory. He even dusted off an old music notebook, filled with compositions and ideas from his youth. Ruth, now his beloved wife, became his personal music teacher and also took on the role of instructing the children. Their shared love for music brought them even closer, and it became clear that both Ruth and Enrique possessed an extraordinary natural talent. Emboldened by this realization, they decided to take a leap of faith and opened a private music school together. The school quickly became a place of warmth and creativity, where they could pass on their love of music to the next generation. Their wedding was a modest affair, intentionally kept low-key to avoid drawing attention. They didn't need the pomp and circumstance. Their happiness lay in the simple joy of being together. They couldn't take their eyes off each other, marveling at how fate had brought them back together after so many years. Only now did Enrique fully grasp how he had been living someone else's life for so long, trapped in a career that brought him no true joy and in a marriage that had been devoid of love. The only part of that old life he didn't regret was his daughter, Bea, who had been his beacon of hope and reason for living through all the struggles. Ruth quickly bonded with Bea, her natural kindness and love for children making her a perfect fit for the family. Having worked at a school, Ruth knew how to connect with children, and she and Bea soon became inseparable. Marlene, who had initially feared she might be let go with all the changes, was reassured by Enrique and Ruth. "Don't worry, Marlene." They told her, "You're part of our family now. The children adore you, and we need you here. With Bea and now Adamastor, our house is full, and we need all the help we can get. Besides, we can't imagine our lives without you." Meanwhile, Cecilia was being held in custody, awaiting trial. The days dragged on in a blur of confinement and fear, and she desperately prayed for a chance to meet with Enrique. However, Enrique took his time, delaying their meeting as long as possible. He wanted to ensure that she learned a hard lesson, one that would deter her from ever attempting to deceive anyone again. Over time, Cecilia's appearance deteriorated. She grew thin, her once vibrant skin became dull and lifeless, and her health began to decline under the weight of her despair. The suffocating thought of spending years in prison gnawed at her, pushing her further into a state of panic and hopelessness. So when Cecilia was finally informed that her ex-husband was ready to meet with her, she nearly leaped with joy. It was the moment she had been waiting for, the sliver of hope she had clung to. But when Enrique entered the negotiation room, he was taken aback by the sight of her. The confident, insolent woman he once knew was gone, replaced by a frail figure in a shabby gown, with greasy hair clinging to the back of her head. She looked up at him, and the tears began to flow uncontrollably down her gaunt face. "Forgive me, Enrique," she sobbed, her voice choked with desperation. "I know I'm to blame for everything. I've lost everything. I'm left with nothing. Please, I beg you, drop the charges. I can't bear the thought of going to prison. I'll go straight to my mother's house and never come back into your life. Just please forgive me." Enrique stood there, a mix of emotions swirling within him. He had come to confront the woman who had betrayed him so deeply, but seeing her in such a pitiable state, all his anger seemed to drain away. Instead, he felt a profound sense of sorrow for the choices she had made, for the life she had squandered in pursuit of greed and vanity. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Cecilia, I've already made my decision. I can't simply forget what you've done, and I can't undo the harm you've caused. But I don't wish to see you suffer like this either. I'll speak to my lawyer and see what can be done to help you avoid a long sentence. But understand this, our lives have taken different paths, and there's no going back. I hope you find a way to start over, to become a better person. But as for us, our chapter is closed." Cecilia nodded, tears still streaming down her face. She knew that Enrique's words were final, and though they weren't the complete absolution she had hoped for, they offered a glimmer of hope for her future. As Enrique turned to leave, she whispered a soft, broken thank you, knowing it was all she could say. With that, Enrique walked out of the room, ready to return to his new life, a life where love, music, and family were at the center of everything. Ruth and the children were waiting for him, and as he thought of them, a sense of peace settled over him. The past was finally behind him, and he was free to embrace the future with open arms. Enrique looked at Cecilia, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "I hope your time in jail has taught you a valuable lesson," he began, his voice steady. "You won't steal from others again, especially not from the hands of the person who provided for you. And you won't mistreat your next husband either. Your plan failed, and now that my vision has fully recovered, I see everything more clearly than ever. Bea is a wonderful girl, and she's thriving. She gets along beautifully with Marlene, Ruth, and her brother Adam Astor. The problem was never her, it was you. You're an egotistical, calculating person who only thinks about your own interests." Cecilia's tears flowed freely as she listened to his words, each one striking a deep chord within her. Enrique continued, "I'll drop the charges, but understand this, if you ever show up again, you'll find yourself right back in prison. I've kept the security camera recordings as proof." Cecilia, now humbled and broken, whispered softly through her tears, "Thank you. You are a true human being." With that, Enrique turned and left the room, leaving Cecilia to reflect on the choices that had led her to this point. His words were firm, but they also carried a finality that she couldn't ignore. The chapter of their lives together was closed, and Enrique was moving forward, free of the burdens that had weighed him down for so long. As for Enrique and his family, they embraced a new chapter filled with peace, harmony, and love. The private music school that Ruth and Enrique founded quickly gained popularity, attracting many students from the city and beyond. Parents eagerly enrolled their children, hoping to give them the gift of music under the guidance of two such talented and passionate teachers. Bea and Adam Astor also flourished in their new environment. While Bea remained devoted to the piano, often losing herself in the melodies that her father had once played, Adam found his passion in the violin and drums. Together, the siblings created music that filled their home with joy and laughter. Ruth, ever the creative spirit, often composed her own melodies and wrote poetry, which became the foundation for the family's own songs they loved to sing together during their many happy moments. In the end, Enrique's life was filled with the meaning he had always longed for. He had finally found the true happiness that had eluded him for so long, not in wealth or business, but in the love of his family and the music that had always been a part of his soul. The life he now lived was one of fulfillment and peace, and it was everything he had ever dreamed of. As we reach the conclusion of this powerful story, we're reminded that life is full of unexpected twists and turns. What began as a tale of luxury and comfort unraveled into a journey of self-discovery, where true happiness was found not in wealth or status, but in the love of family and the joy of shared passions. So what have you learned from Enrique's story? How has it touched you? And what lessons will you take with you into your own life? We'd love to hear from you. Please share one thing you've learned, and we'll bring into practice in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon.